Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Career Podcast. I'm joined today by Nebel Crowhurst, who is an absolutely super person. I love speaking with you, Nebel. All my favourite people are coming on the podcast, which is fantastic. I'm very lucky in that respect. But I would like to introduce Nebel officially because obviously that is polite. You might not know her. You probably will. But she's a Chief People Officer. She works fractionally. Tell you a little bit more about that, I'm sure, as we go along. And also is developing quite a reputation in board advisory as well. She's an investor. She's an international speaker, fantastic mentor, and of course, chartered FCIPD and FLPI as well. So probably hear about that. Agile HR, yes, I'm into that. I can take a little bit of that as well in future work and engagement stuff. But our paths have crossed for sure in the podcasting area. So you're also a podcast host, Nebel. So I'm going to say hello to you. It's lovely to see you. And I was hoping that you might be able to tell people who are listening rather than watching where you're from and a bit about the office that you're calling in from.
Thanks, Carolyn. Lovely introduction. And it's a joy to be here and join you as part of this conversation. So where am I? I live just outside Brighton. So I'm in the lovely Sussex countryside. And yes, I am in my home office and my house. It's my lovely cozy space where I like to work from, but also has my book nook. So I've got a lovely comfy sofa and all of my wonderful books. Anyone that knows me will know I'm an avid reader and bookworm. So I have many books that are seen normally behind me when I'm in these types of recorded situations, but I've also got lots that are to the side of me that you don't see on camera. That is my pile of things that I am yet to read. So if it's on my shelf, I've read it and I probably want to go back to it. But if it's not on my shelf, I've still got to read it. And I have got a lot that I have ambitions to get through. So yeah, I'm terrible. I buy more books before I'm ready to read them.
You're very good. You do read a lot, I know. And I must say, I read a lot, but it seems to all be online. But I think the idea of having a book in your hands is really quite a luxury these days. To start off, I always ask guests this question because it helps listeners to relate to you and what you're about to say. I'm going to ask you where you put yourself on the AI spectrum.
When I think about this, I suppose I tend to be someone that's always curious. So in terms of curiosity, I'm right up there on the scale. But in terms of my experience and my skills, I'm probably at the midpoint because as we all are on a bit of a learning journey with how we use AI. So maybe I'll put myself around a 6 in the middle, higher level of curiosity, but still very much learning because there's so much to understand because of the speed and pace of evolution and new things that are coming at us every day.
Yes, absolutely. That's so true. Okay, I'd probably put you a little bit higher than that, but anyway, that's okay. So yeah, now as you do work across a multiple range of clients, it gives you a wide lens, which is fantastic. And really, I was hoping that you might be able to give us some insight into your thinking in terms of AI right now and how it compares with what you observe. So if you are there on the scale, where are your clients on that scale, would you say? I don't mean general. You could put them in a number, that would be unfair. But
Yeah.
are they there or thereabouts or above, below?
I think it varies. And I think it varies on the type of business, the size of business, what type of industry they're in. I certainly think there's a maturity scale in terms of the way in which AI is being used in business, but also then more specifically in HR. And of course, we've got people that are hugely progressive in their mindsets, experimental, trying new things, comfortable to bring in new ways of working, and right through to people that will actively push against anything new in this kind of space. And I don't often see people in that regard so much when I think about the people that I'm working with. I think people are very curious, but there's also a level of reservation, lots of concern. So with the curiosity, I think definitely comes concern from a ethical perspective, from a compliance point of view, safety and regulation, all those kind of things that we think about within the workplace environment, but also a real appetite to want to be able to use AI to create efficient working practices, better ways of being able to get work done, enabling people to deliver more value in their work because they're not weighed down by more kind of straightforward administrative tasks. So I think we're very much at a changeable phase in the workplace, and there's a huge spectrum, and I see lots of different examples of where people are using AI, where they're being cautionary about it and where they're being more experimental with it within businesses, but also within my HR peer group and community. We're all talking to one another. We're all sort of sharing stories and experiences, and that in itself can be a really helpful way of being able to move forward to implement new tools in the AI space.
Yes, that's very interesting to position it like that. So you're seeing quite a range, but they're, as you say, perhaps more towards the cautious in terms of the majority. Yeah, yeah. In terms of trying to get work done, when I'm speaking with clients, they always, really go towards, let's say, the kind of the idea of ask HR. Let's say, how can we make a big win straight away? Ask HR is one idea, by which, of course, we mean whereby AI picks up a lot of the questions that employees might be asking, and then the triage is anything that needs to be dealt with by a human. But if I could ask you, what do you think the next thing is? Are you seeing patterns? Because you mentioned that they're looking for ways to get jobs done, HR work done, for example, or L&D work done. What do you think the next thing is, or what is it now that people are focusing on? They may or may not, by the way, of course, have got the other one in place.
Yeah, I think there's actually work to be done just to get the most straightforward, simple tasks put into practice, utilizing technology and AI. I think there's a lot of work still there that needs to be done specifically in HR. And what comes with that then is a good communication and cultural change, because when you're in an environment where you've had perhaps a culture in which employees can go directly to somebody in HR because they've built those relationships and they know that's who they go to as the first course of action. And now we're moving to a space that says, actually, your first course of action is to use an online chat or a bot type solution to get the information. In some ways, that's really helpful because that can be really efficient and fast. And in other ways, it doesn't feel very human. And so people receive that in different ways in the organization. And I think there's even work in that space where we need to land that well. So the different types of AI that we can utilize in business, that initial response type, that's generative AI, the ChatGPT style, large language model type tools, we're all becoming more and more familiar with both inside and outside of work. But as you move forward into implementing AI assistants or AI agents, I'm not sure we're quite there yet in the HR space for a long shot. I think we're a long way away. I think there'll be some organizations that have been really progressive. And then you go all the way into kind of agentic AI as a whole nother realm, where I think if we were to put those things on a maturity scale, I think generalizing in the HR space, we're probably really only just getting to grips with generative AI and the way in which we utilize that in our businesses.
Yes. Okay. I think that's absolutely spot on in terms of how I'm experiencing it with clients. And I love the way you brought the cultural aspect in, because so few people, when they're discussing AI, actually think about that side. I encounter it from the point of view that when I'm helping workforce members to adopt it, or managers to know what to do with it, I do come across the cultural side, of course, but I think it's almost like poo-pooing it sometimes. People say, oh, people get with the program. No one uses the term anyway. It doesn't matter. But actually, that's not the case. I think even if people are using it at home, which probably are, it's a totally different thing to using it at work, isn't it? Because you've got to, like, where are my colleagues with it? Am I allowed to use this? What should I use? Will I be punished if I get it wrong?
Yeah.
What's going to happen to my job? What time am I going to have? What am I going to do with my extra time? And P.S. we won't have any extra time as well. So do you think then that the cultural side should have kind of a whole approach to it as a separate, not just a tack on, but to be thought about in advance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there needs to be some intentional thought that goes into what shifts happen in the environment of the organization and the culture alongside the use of technology. We hear so often, like you've just said, you don't necessarily just get extra time, you do different types of work. And this whole narrative of AI is taking our jobs, we have to step away from that perspective. It's evolutionizing the way in which we do work. And there are some areas in which we have to be very mindful of the impact of what that looks like, especially in areas like early careers and the impact that technology has in those types of jobs. But the reality is the utilization of tools that create efficiency, we're just going to add more value. So that's the reframe for me. It's about value add in the work environment rather than things being taken away. And we can do more meaningful, high impact work when we have some of the more administrative tasks made more straightforward for us. Yeah, I think there is a really important cultural piece that goes alongside this. I think there's another piece at play here, and there's been a few conversations recently that I've had about AI and the impact on the workforce. And AI is one thing, especially when we think about it from a cultural lens. I think at the same time, we've got the whole difference in how we work today. So hybrid working, working remotely. So to me, there's like a compound effect. It's not just AI. It's also the environments we work in now are very different to the environments we worked in 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. When we think about creating a culture in an organization, when historically you were more commonly in the same space as one another, in person, the environment that you created or endeavored to create was somewhat easier to do so because we were there as human beings. And now in the context in which we work, where we're working virtually because of the use of great technology, we have to be much more intentional about the cultural environments that we create in organizations. And to me, that's a combination of factors that means that this cultural and environmental piece is more important than ever. And our thoughts around it and our intentions behind it are even more important than ever.
I think that's fantastic. And I hope people will really listen to that, because that's the human side of AI. This is not, we don't want the tail wagging the dog. We need to make AI work for us as humans. So when you walk into a client then, Nebel, how do you assess? Do you have an assessment approach as to what's the balance that they've got and whether or not that balance is right? Are there any telltale signs? What do you look for?
Yeah, anytime you're starting a new relationship with any business, whether it's in the capacity that I am, where it's more in a fractional or an advisory role, or whether you're joining a business as a new full-time person, you spend time assessing everything. And this needs to be one of the major components of that. And when I think about some of the work I've been doing recently in some of the businesses I partner with, when there's solutions required to business challenges that are being faced, quite commonly, one of the enablers is the introduction of more effective and efficient technology. Everyone agrees and everyone nods and says yes. And then the debate and the discussion and the challenge comes about around how do we implement that? What's the cost to that? What resource do we need to make that happen? And it's almost like we're getting blocked. The ambition and the desire is there, but we can't quite see the best way forward. And more commonly, what I see is where there is exploration and curiosity and utilizing new tools, it tends to be in the kind of commercial commodity side of the business, and far less so in the HR side of the business. And in HR, we've got to get better at being able to present our business case for the importance of investment in the improvement of HR technology, because without us improving the infrastructure in which we operate in within HR, we can't then be the best possible enablers to the business to be successful.
So that, I mean, that's amazing, but you come with a lot of credibility already. So when you go to see the board and you tell them this story, maybe they are thinking, well, obviously the that's what she's talking about. So we won't argue, we'll get on with it. I work in the dream world. But how does HR put that argument together, really, powerfully? Because I've been in that situation before where mainly the board is mostly concerned, well, but it's AI now, so you can cut headcount. What do you want more money for? What are you talking about? Budget? You want to do more training? What are you talking about? Surely AI is going to do everything.
Yeah, it's a reality check conversation. And as a side note, before I answer that, I'm finding it really interesting the more that we're hearing about how organizations that are a bit more progressive in their thinking are actually bringing together the HR and IT functions. And in some areas, their overall leadership role is a combined people and technology role, which I think is a really fascinating shift and move forward. And one that I think will be really powerful. But when we're having those conversations, the way in which we need to be able to show the credibility and demonstrate the case is we have to have data insights and facts behind us. It's no different in any type of situation when we are presenting a business case for a people initiative, whether it's a people initiative that's related to management development or a people initiative that's related to investment in technology. If we go to the board without the right data and insight to help them to see the positive impact this investment will have, they're not going to listen. And this is why we have the challenge that we have in HR, in which people feel like they're not being heard, they don't have the voice around the table that they think they should have. It's because we don't show up with the right information to demonstrate commercial knowledge and credibility in the business. If we're going to have a conversation with the CFO to discuss investment and budget, we need to speak their language. So we've got to present our cases in a really commercially savvy way that links the investment into the bottom line business performance. Otherwise, we won't get the investment. And that's why I feel we're probably in HR one of the most underinvested areas of a business, is because we're not presenting our case as commercially well as we could be.
And so that all sounds very rational and very logical. And I'm sure people would find out a lot more by following you on LinkedIn if they wanted to know exactly how to go about that. But what do you think that, apart from the obvious sort of, oh yeah, you're going to have more free time, therefore you'll have more time to find out what the business is supposed to be doing and think the whole sort of shooting match together. But what do you see the HR team as being, what are the benefits the HR team of AI, that relationship that they're going to have with AI? What do you think the really bottom line is for them?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. There's the human side of technology. So I think one of the things that HR people find challenging right now is the workload volume. There's some really great work going on in our space to assess how are HR people feeling in the profession, what's causing them the biggest headache. And most of the time, it's the level of expectation of what we have to deliver and the workload. So, of course, AI presents an opportunity to reduce that workload. That's great. What we then need to make sure we're able to do is to really do that human stuff. So whilst technology is going to be a great enabler at driving work forward, if you work in HR, in my view, the reason you're in HR is because you really care about people. And you know that by supporting people, you're ultimately supporting business and ensuring it's successful all round. So that value add piece comes from giving more space and time to be able to be more present, to be able to be more human, but it also enables that strategic thinking. So we get lost in a world of operational, tactical, transactional work in HR, and that is not where we add the most value. We are a strategic business enabler, but unless we can eliminate some of the noise that is that kind of more reactive, transactional work, we can't step up and out of that to truly be the strategic partners that we're able to be. So for me, it's two significant benefits. It's really showing up and doing the human work, and it's really demonstrating the strategic support that we can provide by not being bogged down in administrative, transactional, reactive work.
Okay, so that's a great answer, and it sounds amazing, and it's one that I'm certainly sold on. Where does a person start with that? What advice would you give somebody in terms of where they start? Let's say it's a small to medium-sized business, just to start off with. Where would they start? The person leading the HR function, it's Monday morning, they've listened to the podcast, they think, great, what do I do now?
Yeah. So where you start is you do some analysis and you understand what's going on in your function and where time is being spent and where that time is feeling wasted. So I go back to my point about data and insight. So generally speaking, I try to use an evidence-based approach in the prioritization and the decisions that I make. In any kind of people strategy work that I'm doing, I think the only way you can be certain of prioritizing the right things is using data and insight to inform that. And this would be the same in this circumstance. So understand what's going on in your team. Where are they spending time doing things that could be done differently? How much of that time is being spent or wasted on work that could be done in a different way? Do some calculations around the cost of that, and then understand what a solution might look like in contrast. So if an extensive amount of time is being spent on simple tasks like answering straightforward policy-based questions, how much time is being spent on that? What does that equate to in cost? And what can you put in place as an alternative solution? And what's the cost differential? And then overlay that with, okay, that's taking up X amount of hours per week, per month. What the team are going to be able to do instead is this work, and this work adds this value because. So it goes back to gathering data and insight. And some of the insight can be intuitive and anecdotal. That's okay. I'm not saying everything has to be a kind of numbers-based or a data-based point, but you do need both. I think to have a true evidence-based approach, you should take into consideration both hard quantitative data that informs why you're making the decision, overlaid with your experience, intuition, instinct of where you feel things need to be moving forward. That's the starting point. Do your analysis and understand what's going on in terms of the workflow in your team. Then you can think about what the solution looks like to help improve that.
That's very good advice. And I think that whoever's listening will think, yeah, that's going to influence me, and that they'll leave a note to tell us that they've done that or what the outcome was. I'd love to hear from people when they try that, because there's this almost hype that, oh, I was hearing coming out of learning technologies this month that, oh, the conversation is moving on from pilots to actual projects, and everybody's involved in projects everywhere you go. I think it's easy to get swept up with some of that. And is your impression that perhaps it's not quite so urgent as made out, and that you can rely on still doing pilots?
Yeah, I don't see any issue with doing pilots. It's an interesting thing to have come out of learning technologies. I think a pilot can be helpful in being able to inform some of that decision making. It's another data point. And like we said at the start of this call, we're both keen and interested in agile approaches to work. So for me, a pilot can be a great way to prove or disprove a hypothesis that you might have, that then gives you more data and insight to know which direction to go. It also enables you to course correct and adjust. So you can establish a pilot, test and learn, gather feedback, understand where you might need to change direction, and then land things more successfully. I think if you go too much into thinking you know the absolute answer to the outcome too early, you can fall foul of landing things incorrectly. So for me, if I'm putting my agile hat on, I think testing and learning as we go along and using those kind of design thinking principles is a really helpful way of being able to introduce things. It can also help with that cultural shift, because you can bring people on the journey more comfortably. You can share with them what's going on incrementally. They can feel like they're part of it. They can perhaps feed into it, give their perspective. That then helps people to feel like they're part of the change, and they're much more comfortable with that change.
I can definitely see how important that is. And that very much covers it plays to the agile element, doesn't it, that we're familiar with. Co-designing, for example, the planning involves co-designing. And while you're co-designing, that means that you can actually get buy-in along the way, which is so important. So, yeah, I think my take from that is that people shouldn't rush too much to feel the pressure of moving faster than they need to. It's also important to remember, isn't it, that ROI, return on investment, is very hard to show at the moment in terms of these initiatives. And if you're just rushing into deploying things which you don't really understand very well at the moment, or you haven't got your buy-in from the necessary stakeholders, it could be quite disastrous. So it's better to build slowly, steadily, think about it, go back to your roots, think about all your HR training and what you know, and as you say, your passion for people. Let me ask you about that as well, Nebel, because how do you decide where to draw the line in terms of what you're going to be prepared to share with AI and what it must remain absolutely human and that you protect?
Yeah, and this is where you go back into that space around ethics and how much or little you put in place in terms of policies in the organization around what we can do with the use of AI. I think it's really important that we take the mindset of kind of tech enabled, but still human first. We are still human beings in the workplace. We want to do a good job. We want it to be as efficient as it possibly can be. We don't necessarily, as humans, like some of the boring tasks. So that's fine. But ultimately, we are still human beings, and we need to make sure that we find ways to enable people to feel connected in the workplace. They have that sense of belonging. We have emotions. AI doesn't, I don't think, just yet, but who knows what the future will look like. And that's what makes us different. And so when we're dealing things that are complex in an organization where somebody's facing a difficulty either inside or outside of work, and they need that kind of human support, that needs to come from a real person in HR. It needs to be there for that individual whilst they're facing whatever challenge they're facing. And we need to continue to be involved when we're helping to reduce challenges when things could perhaps turn into a grievance, or we've got kind of employee relations issues. leaning solely on technology in those environments isn't necessarily going to be helpful, because normally what's going on under the surface is a high level of emotion in terms of how someone feels. So, yeah, I take the view of we should absolutely enable using technology, but we should have a human first approach in everything that we do.
And are you able, as a fractional CPO, are you able to come in to a business that might be a small or medium-sized business for a period of time to help them deal with some of these issues that we've discussed today? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so my role in terms of being a fractional is that, in contrast to consultancy, so for example, as a consultant, you might come in to support a business with a specific project for a short period of time. You might come in for 3 months and deliver on a project and then leave again. For me, working fractionally, there's longevity to the relationship. So it's a longer term connection to the business, just not every day, because the business is maybe not ready to have someone in that position full time, or that it's not affordable at that point in time. And so what tends to happen is you've got your operational HR support, but there's a massive gap between that and the strategic lens. So really, I can go in and help guide and steer the CEO and the leadership team in terms of how they build their organisational and people strategy and the culture in the business to help drive them forward, so that they are well prepared and well set up to be able to work through the change and transformation that's going to come in the workplace around technology.
That's fantastic. That's very reassuring, I think, for a senior HR who are thinking, this is a very big ask for me on my own, especially if I haven't got maybe the time. They just don't have the time, or maybe there's a lot of stuff on their desk which involves AI and they're thinking, I don't even know where to start. So, and just that collaboration with you or with a fractional could give a feeling of relief, I would think, to be quite honest. There's a lot of mentoring out of it as well, I expect, because that's going to grow that person as well. So yeah, I could see how that could be important. And Nebel Crowhurst, it has been fantastic speaking with you. Thank you so much for giving your time to the Sovereign Career Hub. There were so many more things I'd have loved to have spoken with you about, but we haven't got time. And I know you're very busy, so I appreciate you giving the time up today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a joy. Thanks, Carolyn.
If you've been listening today and you've found things interesting which you'd like to follow up on, you can certainly go back to talk with Nebel yourself, of course, one-to-one. She's always there, available, I think, through LinkedIn, and the show notes will give you all of her details for you to follow up on. The cadence of this Sovereign Career Hub on Substack is that we have the podcast, and that follows on that week with an article and a resource inspired by the podcast. So it's really inspired this week. It's going to be by Nebel's lived experience that we've talked about on this podcast. So we'll be coming up with an article. I'll be coming up with an article, not Nebel, unfortunately for you, and a resource which I think will help you as well. And that'll have quite a bit to do with jobscaping and that sort of thing that you could say, oh yes, I recognise Carolyn's hand in this, but it's definitely going to help you to deal with some of the things which Nebel and I have talked about today. So thank you very much for listening, and take care for now.